Tonight, extended truce as hope builds for more freed hostages in the Israel-Hamas war.
Here in the U.S., lawmakers grapple over a U.S. aid package for Israel.
There's been a lot of thoughtful negotiation.
Plus a possible presidential run.
If there's ever going to be a time for an individual to run, not on either of the major parties, this would be the time.
West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin sits down with CBN News. And final farewell. America honors former First Lady Rosalynn Carter.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
A fifth day of hostage releases with more possibly in the future. Thanks for joining us for Faith Nation. I am John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. Ongoing talks to further extend an uneasy truce between Israel and Hamas continue tonight with the release of a fifth group of hostages.
That's right. The diplomatic efforts gaining reinforcements with CIA Director Bill Burns reportedly arriving in Qatar for secret meetings to discuss additional hostage releases. New details are emerging as families tell of the last 7 weeks of isolation, darkness, and meager meals. Grandmothers and children among the newly freed hostages taken by Hamas back on October 7th. In an interview today, the relative of one of the youngest hostages, a 10-month-old boy, said there's no price for our loved ones.
He was kidnapped when he was 9. We don't know how he's being fed. We don't know about their condition. We don't know if they're still alive even. And it's unbearable. They promised in this deal, they signed all the sides that all mothers and children are supposed to be released. The Palestinian side, Hamas, is receiving his side of the agreement. Prisoners are being released. Where's my family?
The White House says there are at least 9 Americans still being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas. Americans are not expected to be among the hostages freed today, according to reporting from multiple news agencies.
On Capitol Hill, lawmakers still can't agree on an aid package for both Israel and Ukraine. And while the White House wants action now, there are only 3 weeks left on the legislative calendar. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has more on that. Caitlin, what are some of the issues lawmakers are grappling with?
Jenna, they range from arguments over Israel's war in Gaza to U.S. immigration reform and border security. While a majority of lawmakers agree aid to our allies is critical, there doesn't appear to be a clear path forward.
We passed the bipartisan Israel support package out of the House a while ago. It's been sitting on this in the Senate and on Chuck Schumer's desk, and so we are encouraging him to get that done.
Speaking in Florida Monday, House Speaker Mike Johnson said he believes Congress will reach an agreement before the holidays, but as 2 separate packages.
What we've said is that if there is to be additional assistance to Ukraine, which most members of Congress believe is important, we have to also work in changing our own border policy. And so there's been a lot of thoughtful negotiation ongoing with that. I think most of our Senate colleagues recognize that those 2 things need to move together.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, however, wrote to fellow Democrats Sunday that he plans to bring a national security package to the floor as soon as next week, tying Israel and Ukraine funding together. That bill would also address border security and a number of other foreign policy issues. Meanwhile, Democrats also face pressure from lawmakers critical of Israel's war in Gaza. During a recent media gathering, President Biden said the question of aid to Israel with conditions was, quote, a worthwhile thought. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan clarified that statement on NBC's Meet the Press, saying the current U.S. approach is working.
The approach that he is taking, direct presidential diplomacy behind closed doors with the Israelis and with our Arab partners, that's what's generating the kinds of results that we're seeing right now. That's the course that he's on.
Another sticking point centers around how these aid packages will be funded. Republicans propose cuts to IRS funding, something Democrats are not expected to back. Jenna, John?
All right, CBN National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Well, joining us now is Ralph Reed, chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Ralph, welcome to you. So you issued a letter calling on top congressional leaders to stand with Israel and against anti-Semitism. In all, there are 15 signatories, including CBN's Gordon Robertson. Ralph, what was the purpose of writing this letter?
Well, we felt it was very important as Christian leaders and as evangelical faith leaders to make it clear at a time when Israel has suffered the worst attack since the Holocaust, the worst attack since the founding of the modern state of Israel, and at a time when we're seeing outbreaks of anti-Semitism and even anti-Semitic violence in ways that we have not seen in decades. We just felt that as faith leaders, we could not remain silent. So it's a very comprehensive call to Congress to pass an immediate aid package to Israel as Israel is under attack and is fighting a war for its very survival. But we think it needs to go beyond that, John, and ensure that we understand that we can't just dance to Hamas's tune. Hamas is a symptom of a much deeper problem, and that is its paymaster, Iran, which is the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And that's why we called for freezing the $6 billion that the Biden administration released as part of a prisoner swap with 6 U.S. prisoners. We also called for passage of the Maximum Pressure Act so that we could reimpose the tough sanctions that were put in place on Iran's oil program and economy during the Trump administration.
Ralph, do you expect to hear back from Speaker Johnson or Majority Leader Schumer? And what kind of pressure does this put on Congress for passing that Israel package?
Well, we've been in communication with all 4 leaders in Congress. We've had very good discussions. Speaker Johnson, as you know, has already brought to the floor and passed a military aid package to Iran, and he assured us a military aid package for Israel, and he assured us that there are votes pending, perhaps as early as this week, to crack down on Iran, and now we need the Senate to act. Let me be clear about one other thing, though, and that is that we as faith leaders and Faith and Freedom Coalition are agnostic about whether or not aid to Israel and cracking down on Iran is passed as part of a package with other legislative priorities, or it moves in a series of bills. We just want Congress to act and act quickly.
Before we go, we have just about a minute left to the GOP nomination, if we can. Key Iowa evangelical leader Bob Vander Plaats endorsed Ron DeSantis last week, calling former President Trump, quote, the biggest risk for Republicans to lose the White House. Ralph, I want to ask you, since you're very in touch with this demographic, is evangelical support for Donald Trump waning?
I'm not seeing it so far either in the national polls or in the early state primary polls. But look, Iowa has a tendency to break and to break late. So, you know, DeSantis has just finished what's referred to as the full Grassley, named after Senator Chuck Grassley, namely visiting all of Iowa's 99 counties. He's been endorsed by Governor Kim Reynolds and by Bob Vander Plaats, who you mentioned, and many others. But Donald Trump was there this past weekend, I believe, or prior to Thanksgiving, and I think he's going to be back again this week. He's taking nothing for granted. I expect this to be a very hard-fought battle, and Nikki Haley is kind of having a moment. So, look, Faith and Freedom is neutral in this process, and I am personally neutral. I've got a lot of friends running for president, and I'm for my friends, and that includes Governor DeSantis and Donald Trump. And what we want to make sure of is that evangelical caucus attenders and other caucus attenders get a chance to hear the issues that they care about addressed and get a chance to hear where all the candidates stand on the issues that they cherish.
All right, Ralph Reed, chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Ralph, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thanks so much. Good to be with you.
Coming up, a CBN exclusive with West Virginia's Joe Manchin, his post-Senate political future, and a potential role in a movement to mobilize Middle America right after this.
Welcome back. Well, finding middle ground in today's polarized political landscape may seem impossible. But West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin says it's time to do just that.
And as he prepares to step aside from the Senate, he's turning his focus toward a push to bring common sense back to American politics, causing many to wonder, does that push include a presidential run?
Now, CBN's Winnie Griffith sat down with the senator in this exclusive interview to find out.
After announcing he won't seek re-election next year, the biggest question facing moderate Democrat Senator Joe Manchin is,
Senator, are you running for president in 2024?
You know, those questions have been asked to me so many times, and me not running for Senate has nothing to do with where I think this country should be going. It gives me the time now to go out and see if there's enough other people in America, whether it's me, whether it's someone else.
What do you say to the Democrats that say that you take votes away from Joe Biden?
I don't see that at all. There's no historical facts on that. If that was the case, then how can they say that Ross Perot really elected Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
You follow me? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever how this is going to go. I've never been a spoiler. If I don't think there's a pathway for it, I would not run. And I would not encourage anyone else to be involved. But if we can force the political parties to look differently than what they're looking right now at how they represent the country, if we can force them to look at it and say, listen, we have gotten too far. We've gotten too extremes.
While Manchin isn't ready to show his cards, he did tell us of plans to tour the country and hopefully create a movement that invites people back to the political middle.
You know, what does that look like?
It's just going to be the will of the people. Do they want an option? You know, are they happy with what you have? Is it going to go the way we think it's going to go? We don't know yet. Maybe it won't be Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Maybe it'll be two other people. And right now, 60 to 70% of the people on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, aren't happy with the selection they think they'll be given. Seeing if you can tap into the people that feel exactly like I do. I hear from them all over the country. Everywhere I go, please do this.
Even some Republicans say they'll be sad to see Manchin go. Minority Leader Senator Mitch McConnell praised him for saving the institution when he voted to protect the Senate filibuster. And Senator Chuck Grassley agrees, saying we need more politicians who won't just toe the party line. On energy, Manchin has a reputation for protecting fossil fuels and even gas stoves.
The energy, it's not so much protecting, it's just making them realize common sense. First of all, the gas stove. Can you imagine? It made no sense at all to go over and say you're going to attack that because of pollution. We have reduced our emissions in our country, in the United States of America, more than most any country in the last 2 decades. 90% of all pollution is going to come from one continent, Asia. And with China and India, they're not going to follow suit if they're trying to meet the demands of their economies and the growth of their nation. They're both well over 1 billion people in each one of the countries.
You're a Catholic. How has your faith guided you as senator and now as possibly running for president?
Well, whatever you do in life, your faith never leaves you. I hope not. I always say that you are who you are by where you were raised, how you were raised, and who raised you. And I had a loving family. I was said I was a privileged child. Not to material things. I wasn't privileged to material things. I was privileged because I had unconditional love. And the love of God, and basically the church was a big part of our life. So with that being said, but I looked at all religions and all of my friends, and we used to worship together and go back and forth. Then when I became governor, we used to have prayer services in my office, denominational, interdenominational, all of them.
When you were governor?
Yeah. I have from the rabbi to the imams, to the priest, to the Pentecostal, to the bishop. They used to come in all the time. It was just wonderful.
If there was ever a chance a third-party candidate could have a real shot at the White House, Senator Manchin says it could be now. Maybe the time is right. Is it now or never?
Yeah, you just have to see. I don't think there's ever been a time like this in the political posturing that we have in our country, or the political procedures that we have and how we have to do things. And with that, I think that if there was ever going to be a time for an individual to run, not on either of the major parties, this would be the time. Yeah. So we have to see if you're going to be able to build that type of a force.
In the meantime, Manchin still has 13 months left as United States Senator and says he's planning to make it count. Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Wendy. And for more, let's bring in CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, he says he's not ready to announce. What did you make of the senator's interview with Wendy?
Well, I think the tea leaves are pretty strong, Jenna, that he's definitely leaning towards it for sure. Look, Ross Perot got 19% of the vote back in the day when he ran between Clinton and Bush and George H.W. Bush. And, that was the high watermark. Though George Wallace, the racist guy, remember him back in 1968? He actually got some electoral votes running as a third-party candidate. But I think Joe Manchin is on the precipice of doing this. We'll see what happens.
You just mentioned Ross Perot back in 1992. I remember that election. He was often called a spoiler. What do you think Senator Manchin's chances are of winning the White House? Or do you think that he would be a spoiler, either in favor of the current, presumptive nominees, whether that's Biden or Trump?
Well, look, this is not a diss at Manchin, but he doesn't have a shot. And here's why. The system isn't set up for him to, in essence, win the presidency. I mean, this is a two-party government system right now. If he goes with the No Labels party, they'll be on the ballot in many states, not all of them. It's going to be hard. So it's going to be very, very difficult, not to mention you have money and political apparatus issues, and he's going to get into the race very late. He probably wouldn't get until March or April. So I don't see it happening at all. But I think at his age, which is what, plus 70, what is he, 71, 72, maybe older, I think he feels like, he's got to give it everything he has, and I think this is part of the play here.
David, on the other side of the aisle, a big boost for Nikki Haley this week. The Koch brothers have publicly endorsed her. She was also recently praised by J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon. How significant is this, David? It seems like a lot of momentum is on Nikki Haley's side.
Well, it's significant, but what does that really mean, right? I mean, does she have a chance to win the nomination? I think most people would say no, unless Donald Trump implodes somehow. But of course, people have been thinking that Donald Trump's going to be imploding the last couple of years, and he's just gotten stronger. So I don't see it. Having said that, everything is falling Nikki Haley's way. The Israel situation, look, as much as we're going to talk about the moral issues there in Israel, politically, it definitely benefits Nikki Haley. I mean, she's been very strong on this issue. So everything's setting up very well for her. And this Koch endorsement, if you will, is also basically, in essence, saying to everybody else in the field and voters out there that she is in that runner-up slot right now to Donald Trump. She could be the one to take on Trump one-on-one.
David, just a few seconds left. I want to pose to you the same question I posed to Ralph Reed earlier. Bob Vander Plaats gave his endorsement to Ron DeSantis. What are you hearing as far as evangelicals, the vote coming in the GOP primary?
Well, I can make it very short and say I agree with Ralph. No, I don't really see it. I mean, I don't see the evangelical slide yet. Let's see what Iowa does. As Ralph said, it's a good point. Iowa's a bit of a different beast out there, and Trump hasn't been spending as much time out there. So we'll see. But overall, I think that evangelical vote is extremely solid behind Trump. This idea that you're going to get from other media outlets saying, oh, there's trouble inside the evangelical vote. Look, I think overall, he's got that vote in a very solid, commanding lead.
David, in 15 seconds, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody, thanks so much for your political insights.
Thanks, David.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
A nation pays its final farewells, remembering Rosalynn Carter, when Faith Nation returns.
Welcome back. President Jimmy Carter came out of hospice care to honor the life of his beloved wife of 77 years, former First Lady Rosalynn Carter. The 39th president at a tribute service today, joined by current Commander-in-Chief Joe Biden and former President Bill Clinton, as well as every living former First Lady. Ms. Carter passed away last week at the age of 96. Today, she was remembered for her political and charitable work, her love of Jimmy, and her love of Jesus.
As Reverend Warnock told me, my grandmother doesn't need a eulogy. Her life was a sermon. And it was a mighty testament to the power of faith and to the power of a deep and determined love. And she lived this public love story that we all know of, that has inspired the world, including in these last days.
The former First Lady will be laid to rest tomorrow in a private ceremony at her home church, Maranatha Baptist in Plains, Georgia. Well, Pope Francis canceled his upcoming trip to Dubai for the UN Climate Conference. This marks the second time in as many years health concerns have caused the pontiff to change his foreign travel plans. The announcement comes as the Pope recovers from the flu and lung inflammation. According to the Vatican, though Francis's condition is improving, when doctors asked him not to travel, the 86-year-old decided to call off the trip.
Well, today is Giving Tuesday, and there's no better time to take a break from the holiday shopping season to open your wallet for a worthy cause. Nonprofits across the U.S. say donations are down this year compared with previous years, and that means your support could have a bigger impact than usual. If you do decide to donate, make sure you're giving to a valid 501c3 nonprofit and watch out for scams.
If it's really high pressure, they're contacting you by email or phone or text message, and you've never engaged with them before, that's typically where you're seeing scams pop up.
Today at the Christian Broadcasting Network, all gifts made by tonight will be matched up to $250,000 in order to help provide support for people in need and to reach millions with the gospel through the 700 Club and international programs. Well, if you traveled over the Thanksgiving weekend, you probably already know you were not alone. The Transportation Security Administration says Sunday set a new record as the busiest air travel day ever. According to the TSA, more than 2.9 million people took to the skies, matching TSA predictions, forecasting busier than ever airports this holiday season. On the whole, air travel has much more than bounced back from the pandemic. The TSA says it screened a record number of passengers in 2023. And we'll be right back. Finally tonight, well, wedding proposals are getting pretty elaborate these days. You see them on social media all the time, but this one might take the cake.
It involved, Jenna, of all things, an arrest. Police officers in Wisconsin recently helped a soon-to-be groom pop the question, staging a fake traffic stop to help pull off the big surprise. After pulling him over for a burned-out taillight, authorities asked Troy Goldschmidt to step out of the car. At one point, they pretend to put him in handcuffs and had his unsuspecting girlfriend, Mariah, step out too. With his hands behind his back, giving the appearance of getting arrested, Troy instead pulls out the engagement ring.
What was this bug? What? I love you so much. You're my best friend. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Are you kidding?
And we should add that is a successful proposal. The pair plans to get married next summer. Jenna, what do you think?
That's amazing. Wow.
Thanks for watching.